As usual, a lot is going on in the world on the political front and all along those lines. So, of course, we'll be talking about that. We'll see who else pops in and all in that space. As Sasha Starr was letting us know earlier, Trump is not immune in the 2020 election interference case. The appeal court ruled that earlier today and all along those lines. So it looks like there is definitely going to be some other things that'll be going on, and we'll see if this impacts Trump's run to the political office and whether it impacts his notion of being a major person in that sense of being the Republican nominee and all in that kind of way. So it'll be very interesting to see where this all plays out. And definitely it looks like Trump is even thinking about heading to the U.S. Supreme Court with a very familiar claim, which is that he is untouchable. That is something that he is putting out there and all along those lines. So he is definitely thinking that he is untouchable, and he is trying to persuade the U.S. Supreme Court this week to reverse a judicial decision that was saying that he is culpable and all along those lines. So it might be interesting to see what happens in that way, because he is trying to reverse that judicial decision to kick him off the ballot in Colorado and over his actions concerning the January 6, 2021 Capitol attack, arguing that the constitutional provision his opponents cite does not apply to him as a former president. So I guess he's trying to think that he is above the law. And there are some people that might agree with him that he is above the law and all along those lines. And there is a University of North Carolina law professor. Maybe I'll reach out to him and see if he wants to come on our network as well. But this gentleman by the name of Michael Gerhardt is saying that Trump appears obsessed with trying to place himself above the law. The theme running throughout these claims is that he cannot be held liable at law for anything he has done. And this gentleman, Mr. Gerhardt, was saying that no president or former president has made such outlandish and self-serving claims. So definitely it looks like the Supreme Court, whose 6-3 conservative majorities include 3 Trump appointees on Thursday, is scheduled to hear Trump's appeal of a ruling by Colorado's top court that disqualified him from the state's Republican primary ballot under the U.S. Constitution's 14th Amendment for engaging in insurrection. He is the front runner for his party's nomination to challenge Democratic President Joe Biden in the November 5th U.S. election. So yeah, a lot of folks will be paying attention to what's going on in that sense and along those lines. So definitely got folks that are out there saying conversations about whether he is allowed to do these actions or not allowed to do these actions. But I'm 2 good friends of mine that might have some thoughts to say about this, and I just want to bring that to their attention. But I've got Rick Rosner and I've got Sasha Starr. So apparently Trump is saying that, as Sasha likes to say, the election was stolen, and all along those lines. One of Sasha's favorite lines and everything. But definitely it looks like he's at it again, and I guess he's trying to see that whether his friends in the Supreme Court will help him, because he does have a majority of conservatives in that space. So definitely it would be interesting to see how this all plays out, since apparently he's ready to head off to the U.S. Supreme Court. And maybe Nick can tell us what that's like if he ever makes an appearance on this particular show, since I know he's been in front of the Supreme Court. But I'll start with you, Rick. Rick, what's your take on this? Apparently, he's saying he's untouchable.
My take is Sasha's take that Trump is the front runner right now, according to Vegas betting markets, but that once people wake up, that is, most voters don't start paying attention. It's 9 months to go. Most voters don't pay attention till maybe 3 months to go, 4 months to go. Once they do, it'll become more apparent that Trump isn't electable. Trump has a whole life, 50 years and more of experience of going to court to get what he wants, to delay things. Trump has been involved in about 4,900 lawsuits.
Well,
Often it's people suing him to get money they were owed. The Trump and family are perhaps America's biggest deadbeat family. They have skipped out on about $1.5 billion in debts and taxes that were legitimately owed. And Trump will go to court and let a lender or a creditor say, well, I'm owed this much. And Trump will say, well, I won't give you that much. I'll give you half. And so he loves using the court for stuff. And he, since his election defeat in 2020, he's been less successful at winning in court, but still successful at going to court to delay consequences.
There was one very well-known occasion when Trump paid in full and on time. It was around 1979 when he was buying television sets for his hotel, which he built with his father's money. It's well described in several books about Trump. So the occasion was that he wanted to buy television sets with no money down and as cheap as possible. So he was hooked up with one obscure a shop in Manhattan, which was owned by Russian mafia people. And he explained what he wants. And they said, no problem, we'll give you whatever, I don't remember, 200 television sets at very good price. The only thing is he was told that you have to pay everything in full by October 30th. He said, no problem. Remember, Mr. Trump, it's not 31st of October, it's the 30th of October. 31st, you may not survive, okay? He paid in full by October 30th. That's only one occasion. That was a start of his involvement with Russian mafia, KGB, and so on and on. His trip to Moscow, his election meddling of Russians in 2016, and the Russian money laundered through Deutsche Bank, and for which, amazingly, Deutsche Bank agreed and paid $34 billion. So you know what the regions of Trump's money, because by the year 2000, after all these casino failures and bankruptcies and so on, he was not even zero. He was minus $250 million. He wasted all $400 million that his father gave him and some, and he was in minus 250. And that's where Russian mafia money started to go through Deutsche Bank to him, and he started to get on his feet, and so on and on. So we know the origins of Trump. We know what he's trying now to build the axis of U.S., where Trump is the Führer, Orban in Hungary, and Putin in Moscow. And that's the reason for the Tucker Carlson trip to Moscow and his dealings with Putin and Orban and so on. That's, there is no point to talk about. See, Democrats want Trump to become a nominee. Because once he's a nominee, he will be taken apart. He will be there was nothing will be left of him. It's a damaged goods. But Nikki Haley is still there, and
Nikki Haley's still there. We'll see what happens in that regard. One of the things I was going to ask, and I was glad that Nick joined us, is you have been in front of the Supreme Court, and apparently that's what we were talking about. Mr. Trump is thinking that he is untouchable because of what happened in the January 6th incident in 2021, but you have been, and none of us, as far as I know, have been in front of the Supreme Court. I don't know, Rick might have been in front of the Supreme Court and everything, but I know that you have definitely been there, Nick. So what is your take? Because there are a lot of people who are saying that he will probably win this court because of the way that the court is stacked right now. I think it's 6-3 majority conservative and all along those lines. But your take on the Supreme Court case and whether he can win this case with a majority conservative justice.
He has a lot of cases. So I'll give one that just was the District Court of Appeals in Washington, D.C., struck down his claim for immunity. I think the Supreme Court will uphold the Washington, D.C. District Court of Appeals case, because just because you're president, wait a minute, let me go take a look. There's nothing in this document, it's called the Declaration of Independence, Constitution of the United States, that grants any president of the United States total immunity anywhere. So it'll be a pretty easy strike down. So he'll probably lose that one. Here's the one he'll win, though. They want him off the ballot for insurrection.
Right.
Okay, first of all, there is something in the Constitution, Article 14, that deals with insurrection, but you have to have notice, opportunity to be heard, and we went over this before, a trial and adjudication. What happened in Maine and Colorado was some Secretary of State said, well, I had a hearing with a bunch of my groupies and we're all Democrats and we don't like them, so hey, you can't be on the ballot. That ain't going to cut it. So the thing is, he will win that one, and he'll ignore his losses. He'll ignore his losses like it didn't exist, and he will pound on his chest, I beat Colorado and Maine, because he's Trump, And as much as Sasha likes to bash him and everybody here likes to bash him, it doesn't matter, because his opponent is not a legitimate opponent. His opponent is a guy who can barely talk and walk.
But Nick, hold on a second. His opponent might be trying to get some backbone, and I'd love to hear both of your thoughts around this, because recently, and we talked about
Trump
before, Biden is telling Congress to show some spine.
Next year,
hold on a second. Biden is telling Congress to show some spine against Trump on the border.
It's the Democrats' fault.
No, but
it's the Democrats' fault, because they refuse to bring in young blood winners, so they're going to lose with your.
I'm very frustrated by the way Biden walks. I wish somebody at the White House would say, you walk like a rusty old robot. Let's see what we can do about that guy, and show him tapes of him walking and say, this needs to be addressed because it looks like crap. And I think if they could get him some therapy or some steroids and get him walking better,
but hold on a second, Rick and Nick, along those same lines that I mentioned it earlier, and I'm going to bring it up again. There are people that sometimes see him. I know that Jacoby's brought it up, other people have brought it up on his network, when he tries to show some serious backbone. And even Sasha has said that it'll be later in the election before people start paying attention to these issues and everything. But apparently, as I said, Biden is telling Congress to show some spine against Trump on the border deal. And that border deal actually involves not just the border, but also aid to Ukraine. So he took the border fight directly to former President Donald Trump on today, blaming his predecessor and the putative challengers for torpedoing a bipartisan immigration agreement out of crass politics at the expense of national security. So he was weighing in forcefully after months of largely staying out of the fray, and Mr. Biden called on congressional Republicans to show some spine and stand up to Mr. Trump.
I was reading the conservative columnist Jonah Goldberg a couple hours ago, and he said this is another one of those hold your nose elections where people don't like either of the candidates, but they vote for the one they dislike the least. And in that case, Biden beats Trump by 13 points. Now, I watched most of Biden's speech earlier today, and he talks okay. He's in command of the facts. He momentarily forgot the name of Hamas, and his speech is sometimes halting. A, because he's an old man, but B, because he's had a lifelong stutter, which the Republicans like to exploit. But he's not losing his mind. He doesn't have dementia. He's an old man with squinty eyes who has paper-thin skin. So, yeah, he looks old as heck, but he's got 47 years of experience, and he gets stuff done even under challenging political circumstances. So, I'd love to have a charismatic candidate in there.
But Rick, along those same lines, how much, and this is for both Nick and you, and if Sasha wants to jump in as well, there are a number of people that are thinking that the Republican Party is being held hostage by the MAGA crowd, as well as held hostage by Mr. Trump himself, because that's one of the things, and you said you watched that speech that Biden said. He said that Mr. Trump would rather weaponize the issue of the whole notion of immigration than actually solve it, and he has leaned on Republicans to block it, and it looks like they're caving. Frankly, they owe it to the American people to show some spine and do that what they know is to be right and everything. So he's definitely saying that there might be some holding of hostages, and I know that there are some people on this network and just in general that would say that the Democrats are being held hostage by the likes of AOC and others that might be more to the left side of politics. But what is your notion of some of these interest groups holding both of these parties hostages?
They're all full of it. It's all politics. Let me tell you what they're trying to do. Pass this, quote, bipartisan in the Senate National Security Act. But here's the problem. The National Security Act goes through 4 different topics. Number 1, immigration. So it's over here. And they put them all together like they're one topic. Immigration. Then they put in funding Ukraine over here. Then they put in funding Israel over here. And so what happens is, and then they put in another thing, reestablishing and sending money to the Gaza Strip. So we get to rebuild what Israel destroyed. So what happens when they put all this garbage together, there's only one conclusion: don't vote for any of it. And so that's what the Republicans are doing. I can't blame them. And by the way, it cost us, we're going to borrow $112 billion to do it. What does that mean? Anybody on this panel listening to it would never dig into their pockets and write checks for thousands of dollars to pay for any of this garbage. And that's called the National Security Act. I agree with Mike Johnson. It's dead on arrival because they should have segregated all 4 of them into separate issues, not bundle them into one big package and ram it down the throats of the American public. And that's part of the reason people don't like Washington.
No, that's why people don't like Washington and everything. But along those same lines, it does look like, and some people are saying that it is not going to happen. I know Sasha is thinking that she still has a road to victory, but it does look like, because he wasn't on the ballot, that Nikki has finally got a victory. So Nikki Haley looks like she will win the Nevada Republican primary. So she does have at least one victory.
But she wins 0 delegates because Nevada's current primary system has a Republican primary and Republican caucuses. The caucuses are in 2 days, and Nikki Haley is on the primary ballot. The primary doesn't award any delegates. The caucuses award all the delegates, and Nikki Haley isn't on the ballot in the caucuses. So Trump will win all the delegates. It's all very weird and stupid.
That is weird.
Let me ask Nick, do you think that the bundled 4-part National Security Act, that when the Senate and the House shoot it down and say, no, we were not going to vote for all 4 of these things together, do you think that's a negotiating point where Biden will say, well, I wanted to give America everything they want, but I guess I can't get away with that. So now I'll just say, let's just do immigration. Do you think that'll happen?
Yeah. I mean, because right now it's a political act. It's not if you want to deal with the issues, you've got to deal with each issue separately. Immigration is totally separate from funding the Ukraine. And funding the Ukraine has nothing to do with funding Israel. And funding Israel has nothing to do with giving money to the Gaza Strip and the Palestinians. So you've got to unbundle this. Why they bundle it all together is so that they can all say, I voted for it, but that's because
but Nick, haven't they been doing that forever? Because when I think of pork barrels and this notion of things that are put into bills that have nothing to do with the bill in the first place, and that's been going on for decades, if not centuries.
Right. It's wrong forever. Let's put it that way. So yeah, they have been doing it for a long time, bundling and sticking it to the American public. And sooner or later, the American public is going to wise up. It may be more later than sooner, and realize what they're doing to them. So anyway, we'll listen to Sasha. He's in Canada.
I'm surprised that there's a talk about rebuilding Gaza, because why would you start repairing something that hasn't been destroyed to the end? The Gaza has not been destroyed yet. Israel has not finished its job. So wait, Just wait another month or two until Israel will complete its job, and only then you can start collecting money to rebuild or whatever you want to do.
But
Fine.
it's not the responsibility of the American citizens who are listening to this to build Gaza when we have a lot of homeless people here. Last time I saw Mark.
Absolutely.
Okay? So we have a lot of problems here. We have
we got problems here, but speaking of problems that we have here and everything, there is another court ruling, and I'd love to hear your conversations around this, because I know that in the past when Shaquille has been here and others, I don't know how Sasha feels about it, they have argued that it does not exist, even though there was an entire movement started because of what I'm going to mention and everything. But there is a notion of something called environmental racism, which is where things are built that are polluting, and they are oftentimes built in poor neighborhoods or African-American neighborhoods or Latin American neighborhoods. But the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, in one of its great decisions of wisdom, and yes, I'm being sarcastic, has been blocked from investigating racial disparities in Louisiana's Cancer Alley, which is a decision that a lot of folks are saying could have some broad civil rights implications because of where these alleys are. And like I said, I grew up in Warrenton, North Carolina. We all know about the dump that took place there, and that dump definitely impacted a number of people that were living there, and is still impacting people in the northern part of North Carolina and the southern part of Virginia. So I do know that whether it's Detroit or whether it's Louisiana or whether it's a number of other places, that there are corporations that sometimes decide to dump and do other things that are unhealthy in these areas and everything. So definitely one of the folks, Monique Hardin, the Director of Law and Public Policy for the Deep South Center for Environmental Justice, which is there based in New Orleans, said it will set back decades of work for African-American communities to live in a healthy environment. So one, do y'all think that environmental racism exists and that sometimes these things are done intentionally? You know, as I did say that it can also be a class issue, because it can also be done in low-income areas of all sorts as well. But I just want to...
LA is full now. Louisiana is super corrupt politically, so yeah, they're gonna cover up stuff like that if they possibly can. LA is full of this kind of stuff. We have oil wells all over the place. There was a battery factory that destroyed its neighborhood with pollution for decades. That's taking decades to get cleaned up. There have even been classic movies made about these kind of scams being perpetuated on the people of LA and the people of California, including, I mean, the Who Framed Roger Rabbit is about the scam that got rid of public transportation in LA, even though it's half a cartoon with a sexy rabbit.
Hey, Rick, I can even go a little bit closer, because I think it was about maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was watching TV and I stumbled across an old movie that was starring an actress that had some accolades and all along those lines. But how many of us remember a movie called Silkwood? Wasn't that what that was about as well, with some people that was about
a nuclear, I think, reactor trying to cover its butt after being sloppy. But Chinatown from I think 1974, a really, really good movie, is about land ripoffs going on in LA. Like we have streets named after some of the biggest land scammers in LA history.
Yep. What's your take on
actually,
that?
David K. Johnson wrote a whole book on this issue. And what happens is a lot of the wealthy people go into, and Walmart was one of the key ones that did it. They would go into the local governments and through the process of eminent domain, basically steal the land from people, then put the Walmart up at a discounted rate. And Walmart became extremely valuable because just do the process over and over again. Eminent domain, steal their land. And Mark, now you mentioned that there was a case, I think, in Redondo Beach where near where Rick is, and they did that on the beach. They just took these people's land. Finally,
black people had a really nice beach community, and people like the Dodgers, that have been great for the past decade. Good ownership, good management. Some bad luck. We've only won one World Series, but Before that, they were owned by Frank McCourt and his wife, who is an eminent domain scammer who made a ton on the East Coast doing eminent domain scamming, and used his money to buy the Dodgers and then stripped the Dodgers down, just like did terrible,
But Rick, ironically, and I know Nick, you'll get a kick out of this as well. It's not just always the governments that are doing eminent domain, because there are a number of spaces. I want to say Duke, which I am near, and I think you might be near here as well, and even North Carolina Central University and UNC, and a number of other ones, both up and down the East Coast, as well as in the West Coast. A number of our college institutions use eminent domain as well, and they will sometimes move and push people out because they are expanding their campuses. And sometimes it's to build a football stadium, sometimes it's to build new classrooms and a number of other things. But I know that even here in Durham, that has been an issue even by some of our HBCUs, because they have faced eminent domain. And I know you're not always the biggest fan of all the things that higher ed does, but yeah, higher ed has definitely gone and used the eminent domain to expand their footprint.
And then if you look at New York City, Robert Moses was this great kind of city engineer that put in all sorts of transportation systems, highways throughout New York City, except he didn't like black people. He didn't like minorities. So he ran all his freeways through minority neighborhoods.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's not unusual to see things like that take place even today. They did actually, but it took like 50 to 100 years, restore the lands back to the blacks that had their lands ripped off in Redondo Beach. So unfortunately, justice can be a long time coming before you actually get something like that to take place. So yeah, it is an issue. There's no question about it, and you just have to figure out where it is. Now, what this EPA decision, I haven't seen that, Mark. In other words, why they're not investigating things of that nature, but it's something we'll definitely have to take a look at on our network. There was a great story about immigration on 60 Minutes, okay, and it showed the Chinese immigrating to the United States by going through San Diego, and they just waltz through, because here's the problem with the immigration policy. Now, this according to CBS, they used to allow 2.2 million Chinese into the United States every year. So they'd apply and they would get in. Then they shrunk it to like 100,000. So now they can't get in. So what they do is they fly to Mexico and they go through the Mexican border and they walk in here illegally.
Nick, back up a second, because you said they can't get. You said they can't get in and everything. But as I said earlier, and I'll state it again, I am here near Duke University and not that far from UNC, and I know for a fact, because I want to say there might be 4 above me in 2 different apartments and everything, that there are a number of Chinese Americans, some that are from Taiwan, but I'm talking about literally mainland China, that are coming here to get an education. Now, whether they decide to stay, whether they go back, because I remember, I think it was maybe 4 or 5 months ago at the bus stop meeting a young lady from mainland, and I think she was here for one of the science fields and all along those lines, and she was planning to go back to the mainland after getting her degree. But I know others that have planned to stay here and stay here as long as they can and everything. So just wondering y'all's thoughts around that, because there are a number of people from mainland China and other places that are coming in here through that legal avenue of education.
Oh, wait, one more thing, though. Killers of the Flower Moon, the Martin Scorsese, Robert De Niro, DiCaprio movie that's out right now, this 3-hour, it's about stealing land from people. The Osage Indians were given, Native Americans have been given crap land, for hundreds of years. But in the early 100 years ago, the Osage ended up with crap land that turned out to have oil underneath it. And they were becoming millionaires. And the Killers of the Flower Moon is about people killing them to take their land.
No, we had a guest that spoke on that. I think Sasha remembers him. He might have been about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago and everything, but he was actually involved with that movie and all along those lines. But yes, that is definitely what the movie is about and all along those lines. I know this is the World Politics Show, but there is a political figure that is also an entertainment figure, and I've got to tease her and see what y'all have got to say about that, because a lot of people are trying to figure out what Taylor Swift is going to do and whether she will endorse President Biden again and deliver a lot of the young vote to President Biden, but now she might be pissing off some of the young people because apparently she has demanded that a 21-year-old stop tracking her private jet because, she does get around by a private jet. And so apparently she's being tracked by some young, smart 21-year-old.
So Musk demanded that because if you track somebody's jet, it makes people nervous. Because, look at Russia, where the guy who rebelled, the mercenary leader who fought back up against Putin for half a second, his plane fell out of the sky, not by accident. So she's got a legitimate request not to be tracked, though there is a tracking system. Anybody with any little degree of sophistication can track people's planes.
I mean, but not only that, but correct me if I'm wrong, Nick, but
also,
correct me if I'm wrong, because this comes back to politics and everything, whether you're voting, because I know a lot of people think that their vote is private, and it probably is for the most part private and all along those lines, but definitely there is a lovely little device, this device here, and I'll show it and everything, the phone that I'm thinking probably tracks you on a regular basis and everything. So how much can she think that she won't be tracked when I'm sure she's got a cell phone with her as well, so she's probably being tracked on a regular basis, just like all of us are. But
all she can do is to get a court order, if she can. Maybe it's impossible to do. So then he can track her and many others as much as he wants. But if there is a court order, then he will not track anymore. That's a very simple issue. I don't think it's a political issue of any kind. What there is, what's to do with politics?
Also, she already came out against Trump in 2020. She tweeted something or posted something that shows that she doesn't like the man. So,
oh wow! Speaking of which, we have a disaster in the Middle East and everything. I know they're being facing stuff going on, but apparently one of their former leaders, and I don't know enough about this country. Maybe Sasha knows it and everything, but I did see that apparently just happened recently. A former Chilean prime minister or Chilean president has passed away in a helicopter crash. So what do we know about Sebastian Piñera and his political leanings and everything? Because
I don't know anything. I just know that you probably shouldn't regularly ride on a helicopter.
Well, the one thing I was going to ask, and this comes back to the Middle East, and it comes back to politics, which is what Sasha was asking, whether it is Chile or whether it is some of these other countries. But, in El Salvador, which is a Latin American country, President Bugali has won a re-election by a huge margin. And there are some people out there that are concerned that democracy is losing support in the world and in the U.S. That some people, and I know Adam on the show has talked about loving benevolent dictators, and other people have talked about this love of things that are in the socialistic realm and all along those lines. And definitely there are people that like either the right-wing version of extremism or the left-wing version of extremism. So to both of you, Sasha and Rick, are you concerned that democracy is losing support? I know that in Ukraine it's very much gaining in support because they are definitely fighting against this Russian machine and doing a good job of it. But I'm thinking, and I've heard this word described about Mr. Bugali, President Bugali, that he is seen as the world's coolest dictator. I didn't know that you could be cool and a dictator, but apparently that's how he's being described and everything. But what is our take on this notion of democracy? I know that there's a monarchy that is in the possibility of turmoil because there's a sick monarch, and we'll see whether his son winds up taking over or whether his brother winds up taking over should this end in a certain way and everything. But it's early diagnosis, so we're not wishing death on King Charles at the moment. But definitely your thoughts around this notion of democracy being threatened.
Sasha, go first.
Okay. Look, in very unlikely case that Trump will be indeed elected president of the United States, there is a danger, what I described before. It's axis of Trump, Viktor Orban in Europe, and Putin in Russia. And it's together with the Putin aspiration as a leader of BRICS, which already attracted the attention of 16 the additional countries to join. And their goal is all anti-American vision. Number one is to completely destroy financial dominance of the United States and crush US dollar. So if that's the case, and of course Trump wants to crush US dollar simply because the his motto is the worse is better. If worse for America, it's better for Trump. So he will say, okay, I'm here to rescue United States. Look at the mess what Democrats created. Look at the Biden administration. Now you have a real dictator. You have a real autocrat who is going to get the U.S. out of its misery and so on. Try it. It's not going to happen. I already see that since he no longer has immunity, all these processes of against Donald Trump, and I can see a very interesting thing is that apparently this process, the so-called civil trial of against the Carroll and the Manhattan trial, where he's going to get at least $370 billion dollars, million, not billion, no. And most likely it will be $500 million, especially with what's happened in the last 2 days. And I just heard before this program that the judge issued a letter to Trump's lawyers, which they have to respond by tomorrow morning about the role of Vexelberg in this, in his lying under oath in his trial. So it's going to be $500 million easy. I'm not going to be surprised if it will be $1 billion. It's more likely $500 million. It's a minimum, and $1 billion is very, very viable. And I'd love to see how Trump will go around the United States of America and the world, and will try to collect this money from his friends and say, I'm old Donald Trump, they want to destroy me. It's a witch hunt. All I want to do is to make America great again. And remember, election was stolen. Okay, I want to see that spiel will be played all over the world, and he will be like a beggar going around, and at the same time he will try to become U.S. president. Give me a break, please.
The judge in that case does seem to be pretty pissed off at Trump.
Oh yeah.
So earlier we were talking about stealing land from people. Mm-hmm. The modern equivalent of eminent domain is stealing people's preferences and identities via social media. That it turns out that we've learned through Facebook and Google and Amazon and all the big tech companies that what you think is valuable, and that gets stolen from us when we use social media, and can be used against us by just hammering at us. It's called the Russian fire hose model of misinformation. That if you just flood people via social media and whatever else they consume with messages all day, you can make them believe anything.
But along those same lines and everything, and I'd love to hear your thoughts around this, Nick, because I alluded to you earlier and everything, and I know that you have jokingly said, and I think you're only half jokingly, that you want to take over the media landscape and the dominate the media landscape and all along those lines. And that being said, there is a number of people that are concerned about the future of a democracy, not just here in the United States, but in the world. So I'd love to hear your take on that, because as I said, there are a number of these countries, and it's not just here in the United States, but there are even African countries that have literally moved their elections. I believe there was one in Senegal that was set for February, and now it'll be held, I believe, in November. So they are pushing it back because they were having some political infighting going on. So they literally have delayed their elections after they shut down basically their or had a showdown with their opposition. So definitely your thoughts around this notion of democracy being threatened.
Well, I mean, what Sasha said and what Rick said is certainly true, that the massive amounts of media influence and social media influence that exist today that didn't exist 30 years ago makes a big difference on the election. And so even though right now the polls I'm getting show Trump winning, okay, but things can change between now and whenever. the biggest question I have is the Taylor Swift. Once the Super Bowl's done, she's got a huge following. Literally, I think she has several 100 million followers around the world. Who knows how much she has here? But they're dedicated Swifties like Trump. Okay, that can be a big force if she decides to back one of the candidates. And there's nothing that would scare the Donald more than the Swift factor, because
she already delivered a bunch of her votes in the last election because she endorsed Biden.
I know. But really, the real question is, Mark, how far she would come on board. See, right now, I see Donald winning the election, no matter what we all say here. Because I've heard all this before. Oh, I hate Donald. He did this. Everybody knows his history. Okay, but at the end of the day, when I run my polls on LinkedIn, Donald keeps just destroying Biden. Okay, but that's without the Swift factor. The Swift factor is very different because it's a young demographic voter. If she gets the young demographic voter, there's more of them than there are the baby boomers, and that could change the whole thing. Well,
I have a crazy theory. So beginning in 1918, we had the worst flu epidemic in history. It infected most of the world. And within 10 years of that, and it messed up people's brains. It gave a lot of people sleeping sickness. It definitely involved their brains. Within 10 years after that epidemic, we had the greatest depression in history. And within 20 years, we had the biggest war, World War II, in history. And COVID has infected, I don't know, probably a third of the world, a half of the world. It affects people's brains. I'm wondering if COVID is making people dumber and crazier and making us more susceptible to fascist propaganda. If you drive around like LA, like people are definitely driving angrier and more crazily. And, I don't know.
Okay, I like your comments, and I think they're quite valid. Nick, I'd like to ask you about something. When you're talking about your followers on LinkedIn, I found one very interesting thing. So most likely you have a conservative people who probably would vote normally for the Republicans or so on. Nothing wrong with it at all, except one thing. I have a few friends who are also for Trump and Republicans or so on. What's interesting is that people who are listening to Republican mass media, like, for example, Fox News, what's interesting is that they don't know, they are not aware of any judgments against Trump's the upcoming and all these appeals and all this. When I discussed, I think yesterday with one of these people, and I discussed this civil cases, and I've discussed it. Do you know that Trump had to put $5 million plus for Agent Carroll for a first judgment against him, which he appealed by putting $5 million of his own money. You know Trump well enough through all the writings, David Johnson and many others, he will never pay even $5. That's how cheap he is. Yet he had to put $5 million of his own money. Why? Because no agency, the bond agency or anybody, nobody would even touch, nobody would even look at the Trump to provide the bond for him in lieu of $5 million. So nobody in his right mind ever, and except they're criminals from Putin's sides or elsewhere, to put 83, actually it's not 83, it's much more, it's close to $100 million to be eligible for parole. Now all these people, they are not aware of it, all these followers of Trump and Republicans. So I'm pretty sure that there are people that you're communicating on LinkedIn, they are not aware of all what's happened with Trump. They don't know it, not that they're ignorant, no. They just don't know from whatever media cocoon they created around themselves. they cannot stand anything what's out of this cocoon. I talked to several people who are pro-Trump, pro-Republicans. You know what? When you mention something what is not in their cocoon, they immediately run away. They don't want to talk to you. They run away. Period. They are so close-minded. It's like a cult. The Trump is a cult figure for them. They don't want to know reality at all. They want to believe in their country. So the good thing for the United States of America, if Trump will win the nation, if he will go against Biden, and if he will lose like almost every state, everywhere, or if he will not be able even to get to the election because of the lawsuits and judgments against him or so.
Sasha, I hate to rain on your parade,
No,
but
no.
most of the 13,000 people that are on my LinkedIn are highly educated, not what the media tells you.
Which is very unusual. It's very unusual.
Highly informed voters. Of course, when I do a poll, I don't see why you would vote for Trump over Biden, but you're talking about 2 to 3 to 1 in favor of Trump. Now, here's the only reason I can think of. These are all business leaders, attorneys, executives. You're not talking about, I'm Joe Poolhall. You're talking about smart people are voting for Trump. Why it would be? It's because of what Biden's policies have done to business that we're facing even our own company. And after a while, I hate to say it, we get tired of the government being our enemy. And Biden weaponizes the government against business all the time. So Biden will lose. And you can say Trump is bad, and you can do all the other stuff. I've heard that for all the time.
We hear that, but what are the
At the end of the day, Trump will be president.
What are the two? So just for our information, what are the 2 or 3 worst things against business that Biden has done?
Well, I don't know what it does in any of other industries. I just know in our industry, they're creating this rule called the fiduciary rule. It's pushed by Biden and the Department of Labor, which basically means that if you're out and you're trying to make a living selling retirement plans, you can't get paid type of rule. Okay. And they're going to push the government to push on all of our producers, which basically puts the retirement planning business out of business. And that's just one that I know of because it affects my business. But when he has a general press over all business lines, after a while, you just get tired of guys like Biden and the Democrats. And they sit in their lofty little headquarters at the Department of Labor in Washington, D.C., with absolutely not a clue what the client's needs and wishes are. And frankly, what happens is business owners that are attacked continuously by the Biden administration get tired of it, and they're not going to vote for him. And so what happens? He's losing the whole corporate vote right now as he sits. And
Okay.
And then here's another problem. Believe it or not, business owners are concerned about the national debt, and he spends money. And by the way, Trump does too. So don't get me wrong. I don't know how you can equate this, but this guy blows money on every little deal that comes down the pike. And after a while, business owners look at that and they go, why is Tesla being subsidized by the U.S. government? We don't get it. Why is the chip industry being subsidized by the U.S. government? So a lot of the small business owners, the attorneys out there, they're just go, we're just not going to vote for. Matt wants to know if anyone can join it. Well, send us your email, Matt, and then maybe you can join us. I don't know who you send the email to. Send it to me.
We can send it to bluesradio@gmail.com.
Okay, yeah, all right, yeah. Talk to Mark. He's really available, and then you can join us. But I'm just telling you that what you're looking at is I've seen everybody, and you know all this litigation stuff, and they keep pressing it. Here's what the business owners say. This just demonstrates how the government weaponizes the judiciary. So he's winning all these lawsuits.
I disagree with that, Nick. You know that Garland.
And
Garland,
Canadians are all liberals. That we hate Trump stuff.
It's not true. I vote always for progressive conservatives in Canada, and will continue so. Actually, I would vote for if I could vote in the U.S. I would vote for Republican Party, but not party of Trump. I want them to lose election, the shit out of it, and start rebuilding normal party, progressive, conservative, a Republican Party, real party, because today you have a bunch of clowns, starting with this despicable Mike Johnson, who is running. He's like a Trump's puppy. He's running to him. I said, "Oh, you want me to do this? Oh, you want to do this? Oh, okay. I'll do. This is incredible. They're a bunch of liars. They're a bunch of wimp and despicable cowards. Nobody wants to say a word against Trump, not because of Trump. Trump doesn't have a power to go after any person who is against him, but the party itself will ostracize anyone who will say a negative word against Trump or the party or so on. So they're all bunch of scared whimpers and
but, you can say the same thing about Biden. I mean, can you believe that they can't get one person under the age 80 that could run for office? No, because Biden and the Democrats, he's got a vice grip on his presidency. There's quite a few qualified people out there, and the Democrats refuse to put a qualified person in front of us. And so the thing is, Biden's vice grip is no different than Trump's.
Okay, but there are ways that any other candidate would do worse than Biden. Like Kamala Harris polls terribly.
Yeah, but Rick, along those same lines and everything, there are two issues, and I'm going to bring them up, that are definitely things that I think people are going to be paying attention to on the political landscape. And I'd love to hear what y'all's thoughts are. I mentioned earlier rural North Carolina and what was going on in terms of the chemical dumps and all along those lines. But there have been a number here in North Carolina, but I think throughout the state, of rural hospital closures. So we've got a medical crisis, and I know Kim has talked about that, and you can't go, or you've got to go several miles to get to the hospital. That creates a problem. And there are also some very underfunded, and I know that's part of the reason you founded this network, is the state of public education and the state of education in general. So there are a number of public schools that are being underfunded by, I would argue, both Republicans and Democrats. So is there going to be some conversations around what's going on in our medical care and in our education care? And are those going to be important issues, or do people just not give a damn about those issues?
Those issues are probably 7th, 8th, 9th on the list and people don't have enough room in their attention spans in their brains to contain everything. And the hospital shortage, is it because giant hospital corporations are creating near monopolies and buying up these hospitals? Is there a medical shortage because COVID continues to be a pandemic that's putting pressure on now, if you look at public education, one party is much more against public education than the other. Republicans are very much against, they don't help public ed.
Yeah, and I don't know if anybody else got any thoughts, but there are a number of reasons, including pay. The reason that these hospitals in rural North Carolina and rural areas in general are closing. I mean, it's not just a North Carolina thing. It's in Georgia. It's probably in Louisiana. And they said that researchers recently found that more than 500 hospitals are at the immediate risk of closing in the next 2 years, largely because of significant multi-year financial losses. In addition, they are have lost some of the money, which I know Nick is a fan of to some degree, but not always, of some of the money that they were getting through taxes and grants. So that is part of the reason. And of course, it's a matter of them getting the staff for them as well. So there are a number of reasons.
A lot of pressure on hospitals is when they're bought by big public corporations who squeeze the profits out of them to increase shareholder value and then sell out. That leaves the hospital saddled with debt and no way out except for closing.
My friends, I would like to share with you a little secret. It's better to be healthy and wealthy than poor and sick. And this is the reality of today's United States and Canada too, by the way. But Canada to a lesser degree, because in Canada there's this scheme of insurance, provincial insurance plans. They cover you. You will be admitted to hospital and you will be provided a care, maybe not the best care possible, but decent care at least. if you have a chance to stay alive, you will be given a care which will allow you to stay alive. Nothing more, nothing less. But this is the reality, and you have to really look. There is impossible for a country of such enormous population, territory, and diversity to provide equal care for all people. And just forget it. It's not going to happen in the United States, not even close. So be prepared. Some people will be given better care.
Wait a minute, hold on a second, Sasha. This is coming from a person that's in Canada, and it's my understanding. Like I said, I've got family members that are in Canada, but I have yet to visit your fine country and everything along those lines. But I do understand that the medical care there is better in some senses because of the way that y'all take care of medicine and make sure that everybody has access to medicine much in a different way than we do here in the United States. So that's my
That's what I
understanding.
said. I said that in Canada, generally, healthcare is better than the United States and more affordable, much more affordable, for that say. And yeah, that's a fact. Although a lot of people complain that, for example, if you need MRI, you can travel to Buffalo. It's an hour and a half, 2 hours drive, and get it right away. And in Canada, you have to wait months or so. Although my wife needed MRI, so she had to wait for 1 week. The only thing is inconvenience that she had to do it at, I think, midnight or so. Because if she wanted to.
Canada has 40 million people. The U.S. has
Yeah.
nearly 340 million people.
Exactly.
And plus, the U.S. has 50 states with vastly different demographics among the states, where, you know, a lot of the southern states are in the fat belt where they eat like crap. They're poor, and it's tougher to get good health. Oh, plus they're COVID deniers, so they're undervaxxed.
So they're undervaxxed and they're overweight. You know, an interesting thing, because this is a different system that we have in the United States, which I agree with Sasha. The wealthier you are, the better healthcare you're going to get. But our Medicare system for the elderly is scheduled to go bankrupt between now and the end of the decade. You'll see no politicians. Trump isn't taking the issue on. Biden, nobody in Congress, nobody in the Senate. But it's a major problem. There will be no Social Security by the end of the decade as it goes bust. But here's what I found out since I just get on Social Security this month. What they do is they rip Medicare out of your Social Security check. So I thought, well, here's the solution. What they're going to do is just going to keep ripping people's Social Security down as they take the Medicare premiums go higher and higher, which they have to do. This complete unbalance will not be addressed by any politician because they have to deliver bad news to the American public. You cannot win by delivering bad news.
But so there's a guy there's a guy in my frat who was a school teacher who got thrown into prison for a long time, 18, 20 years, for fondling some of his students. And then some of the students recanted. But that guy is never getting out of prison because there's no upside to showing that guy any leniency, because it just makes nobody likes somebody who might go easy on a sex criminal, even if he is possibly innocent. And it's the same thing for talking about Social Security and Medicare. There's no political upside for saying we have to be disciplined. It can only get you in trouble with the voters.
Right. And you know, the Social Security Medicare system, what they're going to do is they're going to go rely on the government to fund them, and the government's broke because they spend a lot of money on chips for, I mean, are you serious? The chip industry is a very profitable industry, but they just Biden.
But the government can always print up more money.
I know, and we already know the effect of that. It's called inflation.
Right, but that's the deal. That's the cost. The deal is the government prints more money. Money becomes worth less. That's inflation.
That's right. And the poor people get poorer. The rich people get richer. The last stat I had, 1% of the population owns 30% of the assets. 10% own 90% of the assets. and everybody else is bloody broke in the United States. And
Hey,
that is,
Nick, hold on a second, because it's about time to wrap up. It's been a very robust conversation. We'll be back on Thursday, and leading into that show, we'll be going into Coco, which is the music show. But on this day, Tuesday, we go into the show with Mama Noni, which is about education. So she has a school here in North Carolina called the St. Cia Academy. So she'll be talking about her views on education. So that'll be coming your way at exactly 6 o'clock. So we're going to get on out of here. But as always, it's been fun talking to Rick and Sasha, and Kim was in the background, and Nick as well. But we're going to get out of here, and we'll have a conversation on education on the show that is going on with Mama Noni and the St. Cia Academy folks. So, and I know I'll see Sasha on Wednesday for Modern Investment, but we'll get some education about investment as well. So we're going to get on out of here. But Sasha and Rick, it's been fun, and let's get on out of here.
Bye bye.